Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 live on Channels Television Lagos. A quick reminder of our top stories now. All Progressives Congress files application at Supreme Court to review the court's judgment which sacked its governorship candidate in Bayelsa State less than 24 hours before his inauguration. House of Representatives seeks appointment of more Supreme Court justices in the face of multiple cases and need to improve the speed of justice. Minister of Information Lai Mohammed insists that President Muhammadu Buhari will not resign over rising cases of insecurity in the country, and court sentences US President Donald Trump's longtime advisor and ally Roger Stone to 40 months in prison over obstruction and witness tampering. Plus, business, sports and news from Abuja, the FCT, and later, international news from our London studios. Our website, channelstv.com, has more information on our top stories and others. Do subscribe and watch Channels Television's live stream on YouTube and other social media platforms using your mobile device browser, or download the Channels TV app for Android and iOS devices from their respective stores. You can also watch us via your smart TV platforms on Apple, Android, Fire, and Roku TV. It's been over 10 years since the insurgency broke out in the country's northeast. While casualty figures continue to rise, the damage done on infrastructure appears very daunting. In this next report, our correspondent Chris Illems takes a look at the costs of the insurgency to the region.
Death, displacement, destruction, annihilation, all summarize the effect of insurgency in the northeast region of Nigeria. The region, which is made up of 6 states, Adamawa, Bauchi, Borno, Gombe, Taraba and Yobe, occupies a land area covering 280,419 square kilometers, 1/3 of the country's total land mass. Since Boko Haram first struck in July 2009, it's been tales of sorrow and harvest of tears in Borno, Adamawa and Yobe states, the epicenter of the mindless attacks.
Fits the bill.
The activities of the sect, which escalated by 2014, seriously impacted both economic and social infrastructure. 2 million people are said to have been displaced, and number of deaths is put at over 20,000.
We know, like in Yobe State, there are schools and institutions of government that have been attacked. We know of Mamudo, where a number of students were killed in their dormitories. We know of College of Agriculture.
According to the Northeast Nigeria Recovery Peace Building Assessment of 2016, the impact of the terrorist act was put at $9 billion, with Borno State taking the lion's share with a loss of $5.9 billion. The assessment also shows that 30% of houses in the state were destroyed, 5,335 classrooms torched, 201 healthcare centers, 1,630 water sources, 665 municipal buildings, 726 substations were also affected.
Nobody in his own right senses will take money and say he's going to the Northeast to invest today, because money is a fearful commodity. It does not go to where it will suffer.
4 years after that assessment, the region is still counting the cost.
Sons, daughters who saw their parents executed before them. This kind of memories, only follow people to the grave. So this is one of the aspects of the war that I am deeply concerned about.
While various efforts by the government to bring the onslaughts under control continues, it is important to note that the more the war lingers, the higher the cost to bear. Chris Illems, Channels Television News.
Let's get further insight into some of the recent challenges in the fight against insurgency in the country. And we are now being joined by Mr. Bulama Bukati, a conflict and security analyst. I want to thank you so much indeed for joining us. From London, of course. This war has been on for over 10 years, we know. There's been various approaches by different governments. Now, a government from the region has added a new dimension to that debate by calling for the recruitment of at least 100,000 soldiers to execute that war. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think obviously Boko Haram remains an imminent threat not only in Nigeria but also Niger, Cameroon, and Chad. They have continued to kill Nigerian soldiers and soldiers across the region, but also unleashing indiscriminate, horrific violence against civilians who are non-combatants. And I think there is need to revamp military efforts and security and intelligence efforts. But I think 100,000 soldiers is too big a number. I say that not because the war is not serious, but because even the number of the insurgents by all the estimates we have is not more than 6,000 to 7,000. So if you are fighting 6,000 to 7,000 people, of course they have an experience of a decade of war, but they don't have military training. I wouldn't think up to 100,000 soldiers will be needed, but I fully support the call for more military, but also more equipment and welfare for the soldiers on ground.
But the argument, if you remember, is that the population such as we have in Nigeria, hitting almost 200 million people, will call for a stronger military formation and military numbers. So since you disagree, what will be the answers then? What will be the solutions you're providing?
Yeah, so I don't disagree. I think what I said is 100,000 is too big a number, but I think the military effort should be revamped. It should be stepped up. And in terms of the recent upsurge in the insurgency, there are several factors, and I think we need to look at each of the factors and try to address them. For example, there was recently a tactical change in the Nigerian military's tactic of fighting the war. We know that in the past there were soldiers in villages and communities in the front line. But in 2019, by data from the Council on Foreign Relations and others, about 800 soldiers were killed. And most of them were killed in the first half of 2019. And the Nigerian military responded by what they called the super camp strategy. By the super camp strategy, they withdrew soldiers from frontline communities and villages and consolidated them in what they called super camp. And the intention was to reduce the number of military fatalities. And I think that strategy has worked in the sense that it has reduced the number of soldiers being killed by Boko Haram.
Okay,
However,
if I may come in here, if that worked then, what are we missing now?
What we are missing now, what I am saying is, what we need to do is to protect those villages, because the strategy they just adopted has exposed villages and left them unprotected. And that's why we have seen upsurge in Boko Haram attacks. Secondly, we know that this January, Chadian soldiers, about 1,200 of them that were fighting on Nigerian soil had been withdrawn. And the Chadian government said they withdrew the soldiers because their mission has ended. And I think the Nigerian government should work with the Chadian government to renew their mission and bring them back, because Chadian soldiers, because of their experience of conflict in their own country, have been very effective in fighting Boko Haram. And I think they should come back to Nigerian soldiers. They should come back to Nigerian soil and continue fighting together with the Nigerian army. I think that will reduce the number of fatalities and attacks we see of civilians now.
That's a good place to let it rest. I most sincerely thank you so much indeed, Mr. Buloma Bukati, a conflict and security analyst. Thank you for talking to us here on the News at 10.
Thank you for having me.
Let's shift our gaze now to our Abuja studios, where Linda Higbe still has another interesting discussion to have, just to make sure that you get all the information you need here on Channels Television. Linda?
Hello, Gimba. So we continue with our focus on the war against insurgency, and we're getting another insight from retired General Ibrahim Haruna, who's also a security consultant. You're welcome to the News at 10.
Good evening.
So as a retired military officer, do you think we have enough men executing the war?
To determine that, one has to know the threats and the kind of warfare and the various agencies you are going to employ. In our own case, there is no analysis of threats. we seem to be fighting as if the military is engaged in a foreign insurgency operation. They are fighting an internal domestic operation. So the strategies that are used in, for example, the superpowers fighting in Pakistan and other places cannot be employed in the domestic internal front. We have to know that principally we have our excellent police who perform outside, who can perform internally if well equipped and so on. And they would know how to take the challenges and the threats internally. But the way the military have been involved in this particular insurgency and terrorism seems to be out of place and out of sync with the functional responsibilities assigned to the armed forces and police and other agencies. So there is a kind of model. You cannot therefore determine exactly how much military, how much civil and other forces you need, because
now this change of strategy you're talking about, would it include increasing the funding for the men at the forefront of this battle?
Yes, the conception of the funding in this case appeared to be increasing firepower and manpower for the military. But since that is not the kind of warfare we are supposed to be fighting against people we have responsibility for as citizens, you have to take a style that absorbs them into the prospective continuance of being good citizens in the country. And therefore some of the functions being taken by, say, the military ought to be taken either by police or other social agencies. And therefore the concentration would not be on military manpower and military firepower.
Now, there was a recent thing that happened in the Senate today, on rehabilitation of what government has described as repentant Boko Haram insurgents. Do you think it's the good strategy?
As I said, my focus is that if you were fighting in a foreign territory, you can have repentant terrorists or insurgents. But when you are fighting substantially, you are fighting your own citizens, because you should be able to separate the citizens or other people who are brought in for the fair and into the fair. So in terms of your own citizens, you have to look at it from the perspective that you have to dissuade them from taking arms against their country, and you do it with such forces and agencies that will have them absorbed seamlessly over time. And therefore it's not a function for the military firepower as such.
Okay, thank you so much, sir, for coming to joining us on the News at 10 today.
Thank you.
Now, when the News at 10 returns, NNPC cuts March official selling price for Bonny Light and Kwa Igbo crude as Brent nears $60 per barrel. That's in business news. Join us again.